a group for building and established 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 more information about our group, 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 more insights, more insights. I am Edmond, I am Edmond, Today we're privileged to have questions about all of us, Please note that if you were unable to register, please note that you were Okay, so we're gonna move on quickly. 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 Ask you to introduce yourself, study and just give us some background.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I am a proud Nigerian, proud member of the Communist Nation my professional capacity, the health today we heard about the passing, rattled by that,
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. What to you? Thank you. What to you?
My name is for me, I was I consider myself a child of God, and very much like 19GD has said, very committed to living God's purpose on earth by building businesses that can help us transform our many challenges as a people into global business opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Very inspiring, and I think we'll just dive right into the questions that have been submitted. So, would like to start with the first question, and it's pretty simple, but let's dig into it. What was your major motivation for embarking on this path of entrepreneurship? And what are the factors that you can outline that have made you successful in the business environment? I would like to start with Indidi, and you take up after that.
So I've always been motivated by anger. And I always tell entrepreneurs, you're either motivated by joy, passion, or anger. And my motivation is basically seeing problems in my society that upset my society that is something about. And I believe God opens our eyes to see things and stirs up within us words that if we're sensitive to the spirit, we can detect what is coming up in the spirit. And so for the last 12 years, I've really been focusing in agricultural landscape because I'm really angry about the fact that even though we're naturally endowed for agricultural excellence, on the contrary, we remain net importers of food. And 30% of our children are stunted. Food is expensive. Food is part of the world. The average family cannot afford food anywhere else in the world. Today, Ace Foods actually exports to South Africa and to Europe, and we have customers who are partner with us across Nigeria and across the world. And that's just one example of what is possible in our ecosystem. And then in terms of when I look back at my career over the past 25 years, you called me 17. I've been around for a while. 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 Three things. The first is really being grounded in God as grounded, being obedient to His leading. When we decided to go into agriculture, a lot of people thought we were crazy. And if we were listening to the world, we wouldn't go into the sector. But we decided to listen to God. So just being very clear about being obedient to God's leading and, forgetting what the world says. Now everybody says we're so strategic, but at the time they said two Harvard graduates, you could be making millions of dollars. Why would you start a business and be earning 50,000 naira a month? It doesn't make sense. The second is humility to unlearn, learn, and admit that you know. It's really important to stay grounded and stay humble. I remember going for days to try and collect money from goodies. They had finished selling our spices and they won't pay us. And I'll be there waiting and they'll say, wait outside, madam. And they'll shout at me. And nobody knew, I have a national honor. I'm a young global leader. My peers are CEOs globally. And here I am being chastised by a cashier. And if you're not humble, you can't pay the price. If you can't pay the price, you can't reap the reward. And so humility is really, really critical. And then the third thing I'll say is you have to surround yourself with helpers. And for every business, from the day I've conceived a business, and I've started 5 directly, but I've helped start about 20, the first thing I do is I constitute a board of directors. I get helpers. I institute governance, transparency, ethics. I surround myself with mission driven high achievers, people who take the mission forward. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but being strategic about how you get help from the governance at the top to the bottom and surround yourself with people who will achieve this great impact and vision you've set for yourself is really critical. Thank you.
So inspiring. E, over to you.
So the two questions, just so I'm clear, were what inspired me to get into entrepreneurship and what has been responsible for whatever I consider success so far, because I don't necessarily consider myself successful. But yeah, I'll start with what inspired me. I think first of all, it was really I got into the entrepreneurship really from a place of both ego and desperation, just like many young people. At first it was interest, and then it was ego. I felt like, I remember watching The Social Network in 2010 and thinking to myself, well, if Mark Zuckerberg can do it, does he have two heads? So that was how I got in, really, if I'm being honest. But as I started to build companies, I started to recognize the kind of transformational impact that business can have when it's mission focused. And also to draw threads between my experience as a business person in Nigeria and those of business people in other countries that I admire, in Germany, Canada, in the US. And I think there was one major thing I thought was missing in my experience with business people in Nigeria, which was this idea that a business is beyond profits, is beyond just profit that it can make. It goes towards the impact. Unfortunately, that is an idea that still remains a niche idea. With business, people believe the primary purpose of business is to make profits. But I felt like calling me to establish a template for mission-driven businesses. Businesses who had a purpose beyond profit was directly impact on people's lives and establish an Africa where prosperity and purpose is within everyone's reach. And that has been kind of my, would I say, heaven inspired mission in building business here. It's less about the profits. I really couldn't care less if many of the businesses deliver a profit, although I think it's important. But it's actually more about what kind of impact can they have. And by the grace of God, we've been used to really impact on the lives of people through the businesses we built. Whether it was Andela, where we took young people who were earning $100 a quarter to going through our program and coming out on the other side earning $100,000 a year, or Flutterwave, where we helped a number of businesses to be able to sell and get paid globally, right? And also support platform businesses like Uber, help people like TransferWise to be able to move money in and out of Nigeria and establish their businesses which employ thousands of people in Nigeria.
So go ahead, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So to impact in terms of what has helped me in being successful, I really echo Auntie Ndidi's thoughts about hearing the voice of God. Very much like her, I've made many career moves that have puzzled people. But I can guarantee you there were direct instructions from God, even at the time when I felt a lot of resistance. And quite frankly, the resistance was logical. You've suffered so much, you've gotten this business to this point. Why leave now to go do something else? But I think the moment you understand that you're God's vessel, you change your approach and you understand that everything that you're doing, you have to put the kingdom of God first. And so many cases, once I'm divinely instructed, I immediately proceed to obey, and that has been a huge saving grace for me. Two other things that have been helpful for me. One is really taking my time to build fantastic teams and work with fantastic teams. I like to tell people who work with me that the difference between $1 million business or $1 million business and $1 billion business, to bring it home, is that for $1 million business, it's one man who can build a decent business on his own. For $1 billion business, it's a group of people who each could have built millionaire businesses but decide to come together and deliver exponential impact. So it's really being able to find those type of people who are impressive in their own rights, could be doing the business by themselves, but then joining forces with them to deliver exponential impact. And then finally, being extremely focused on impact. A lot of people, like I said, in our business environment, there's so much focus on profit and loss for good reason. And the assumption is that businesses should do whatever to make a profit. But I put it to you that if you look at the most developed countries in the world, all of them have been built by businesses in their domain. And more importantly, the businesses in their domain do not just consider their function to be profit and loss. They consider their function to be building key institutions for the flourishing of society, for the betterment of society. So for me, I've maintained businesses that have a focus on bettering society, providing jobs for people, providing economic opportunities for people, as opposed to just focusing on profits.
Wow, these are very inspiring explanations from both of you. And I mean, certain things resonate between both of you. Mike Muda put it this way. He said, whatever irks you is an indication of what you're created to solve. And like Ndidi said, she was angry at, why we had so much and why we have so much in Nigeria and why, we still are living in lack and wallowing in poverty. So inspiring. So quickly to double click a bit more again, because there are quite a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs who are part of this, webinar. Let's talk a bit more about ideas. Developing an idea that works poses a challenge to quite a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs today. Can you tell us a bit from your experience how you arrived at the ideas you implemented to succeed? How did you? I mean, did you just wake up one morning and you just knew what to do, or did you search your environment to know what the needs were? How did you go about developing that idea? Let's take Ndidi first.
Okay, so as you know, I'm a serial social entrepreneur, and with each idea, I've really been motivated by, as I said, anger. I'll actually share a model. So I've written two books. One is called Social Innovation in Africa: A Practical Guide for Scaling Impact, and the one that I'm launching this year is called Food Entrepreneurs in Africa: Building Resilient Agriculture Businesses. And this model about how to basically identify and then scale, I think is relevant to any sector. So there are 7 or 6 key components of your approach. The first one is that your business model has to be demand driven with measurable value addition. This underscores what he was just talking about. You have to be solving a problem. People have to understand or be willing to pay something for addressing that problem. Or if it's a social enterprise, at least you have to find a funder who's willing to subsidize it. But there has to be measurable value addition. And a lot of us create businesses. I have so many young women who I mentor who say, I make cakes or I make clothing. And I'm like, okay, some of your friends will buy it, but do you have hundreds of people, thousands of people? Is it differentiated enough that it can reach millions with impact? The second is that it has to be low cost. I'm not saying low value, I'm saying low cost. Means you have to strip out all the excesses in this value that you're creating so that you have efficient and effective operations to deliver value for money. Especially in this COVID area, people are not going to be willing to just pay because it's from you. The third is that it has to be simple and compelling with a very compelling brand story. Many of us don't know how to package and tell our stories. He has done a fantastic job of positioning himself, building himself, but every entrepreneur, and we see examples in our environment, somebody like Tara has done a very good job. Mo Abudu has done a fantastic job. You're basically building a brand story around yourself. But even if you don't want to be the brand ambassador, you put your story out there and you tell that story in a compelling way. The fourth is that you have to build resilience into your DNA from day one. COVID-19 is one shock, but there's so many other shocks. Climate change in the agriculture sector, many, many shocks. DNA, resilience. It means how do you withstand shocks, and how does your business model withstand shocks? Number 5 is that it has to engage the community and shape the ecosystem from day one. We don't, we all talked about all the Al-Qaeda businesses that that had to rethink their business models when Lagos State changed policy. There's no business that is not affected by policy, whether you're in tech, whether you're in agriculture, whether you're in the furniture industry, whether you're in the health and education sector. You have to get involved in shaping policy, and your business has to be relevant. So many of us start these businesses without even looking to the policy environment and how it affects us. And then the final one is that it has to leverage technology and innovation. There's no business today that can be started without leveraging technology and innovation, either through how you deliver your product or service, how you engage with your customers, how you manage your operations. And I've interviewed 80 entrepreneurs across Africa who are scaling and who have built successful businesses, and all of these 6 resonate with them. And so that's the model I subscribe to. That's what I've learned from others, and that's what has worked for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. E, what's your thought on the ideas?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was much earlier in my career, I put a lot of stock on ideas. And I must be honest with you, it didn't quite work out well. I remember my very first startup was called bookneto.com. I started it while I was in school. And the idea was I was going to replace our learning management system. You know, I had identified a problem I thought I could solve. And I had an idea of how to fix it. And but I didn't think about a lot of other important things. And you know, as I evolved as an entrepreneur, I've come about a simple formula of some sort. A lot of it very much aligned with what Andy just said, but very focused about how to build new businesses. And it really just starts with identifying somebody with a problem, right? So identifying one person or one institution that has a specific problem, um, and then trying to solve that person's problem exclusively, right? And then thinking carefully about what it would take for you to find other people like this person or institution whose problems you've solved, and then sell them the exact same solution. Because if one person has a problem, right, there are other people like them who probably have the same problem, and then you can solve their problem. So that has been my process over the last 5 years, so to speak. Whenever I start a business, I tend to look at it as a one customer business initially, almost like a, and then after I've designed a solution that works, then I now look for another person exactly like the first customer who has the same problem and pitch them the exact same solution, see if it works for them. And then you do it one, you do it twice, you do it 3 times. Before you know it, you've done it 50 times. Before you know it, you've done it 1,000 times, and you have a business. It's a simple Coles Notes version of what Auntie Lydia said. So please buy the book and follow her advice.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's turning out to be a mini MBA class. Everybody has to go look for that book and buy it. Okay, let's touch on something else that is pretty strong in the minds of aspiring entrepreneurs and established entrepreneurs. Let's talk about funding. It's a major concern for quite a lot of people, and I'm quite encouraged because of both of your parts and how that you've also had to handle issues around funding. How should we go about? How should the aspiring entrepreneur go about capital acquisition, or the existing entrepreneur who wants to scale? How should they go about capital acquisition to be able to help them in their businesses? I mean, there are concerns around the interest rates on loans, people not having collaterals to put on ground to be able to access these loans and things like that. But what's your take on funding and how entrepreneurs should go about doing this? Indeed, let's take you first.
Okay, thank you very much. The first thing I would say is that every entrepreneur has to assess what their funding needs are, when they need funding, and how expensive that funding is. You know, the reality is that there's more money chasing entrepreneurs than the entrepreneurs who can absorb it. And most people don't realize that. From our experience, and I'll make it very practical, you start with family. They say always start with family, friends, and fools. You start with your own savings, you start with your own investments, and you start small. And then over time, you take advantage of all the opportunities for startups. Right now, there are accelerators, there are incubators, there are business plan competitions, there are hubs, there are angel investors. There are lots of people who would actually back a good idea that's well packaged. But they won't back you unless you can demonstrate credibility, integrity, and the ability to utilize those funds effectively. If you have surmounted that, then you have to then take advantage of private equity, venture capital, crowdfunding. You know, always am challenged, and I love to tell the story of Mira Mehta. Many of you might know Mira. Mira started a company called Tomato Jaws, and she was sitting in the United video, a video to start up a company. That time she was going to set it up in Nasarawa State to process tomatoes. And funding video raised her $50,000 just on an idea. And through that, people were calling me from all over the world saying, "Do you know Mira? We want to invest in her company. We want to give her PE. We want to give her venture capital." I was like, really? We want to be angel investors based on a crowdfunding video. And many of you don't believe that crowdfunding videos work, but they do. She has proven it. Now, beyond that, we started Ace Foods. We applied for a business plan competition. It was called Africa Diaspora Marketplace Competition. Since then, we've also gotten funding from the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund, from Innovations Against Poverty, and these have helped us cushion a lot of the growing pains with companies. So I would ask the entrepreneurs here, funding for me is not a challenge. Funding is an opportunity. Now, not all money is good money. Some funding is very expensive. Some funding is ill-timed. So be very, very strategic about how and when you receive funding, who you receive funding from, and how you manage the relationship with your investors. Because I tell you, many people have made many mistakes because they've been desperate. Never, never take money when you're desperate. Take money as a strategic tool to use to build your business when you need it and for the purposes that you have intended for it. And once you prove that you are a good steward of money, you will actually be turning money away. That's my advice.
Hello? Hello? I don't know if
Go
we've
ahead,
lost.
E. Go ahead, E. I know you have a lot of experience with fundraising.
Well, I guess so. So I think very much like what Auntie Ndidi said. I keep saying this. She's definitely showing her wealth of knowledge and experience in this space. The key thing with funding is to first of all understand clearly what you require funding for. And when I say that, I specifically mean, you know, when there are a lot of things that people raise funding for in the earlier stages that they could either rent or they could quote unquote share profit on. A lot of people maybe get funding or look for funding to do things that, quite frankly, in the earliest days, they don't really need funding for in order to demonstrate the idea that they have. So, for example, I'll use my example with Flutterwave, right? When we're starting Flutterwave, the requirement from CBN was basically that we should do. I think at the time was 100 million naira in share capital, and we didn't have 100 million naira in share capital. So what did we do? We had a conversation with the bank and said, "Hey, if we build the software for this payment platform to run, can we make it your software, and we'll just share revenue on it in the favor of the bank?" But doing that meant that we needed, and we would. Hello, sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you, E. I think that somebody's mic is on.
It's on, yeah. So doing that meant that we gave up a lot of revenue in the beginning, but it allowed us to actually leverage this bank's license, which they had paid. I mean, they were a billion naira bank, but we didn't now have to go and look for 100 million naira in order to kickstart the business, because we were able to actually leverage on other people's resources in exchange for a share of revenue. It's the same thing when it came to distribution. When it came to distribution and we needed to sell the software, we partnered with banks and told banks, look, can we exclusively serve your customers? The funds will stay in your bank. And that saved us a lot of money with marketing in the initial time. I remember when I was at Andela, when we're trying to do our program, our first building was a boys' quarters that was donated to us by somebody. Um, it took us a lot of effort to get it cleaned up, everything, but we were able to make it work. Our second office was an old office in Fade that allowed us to use their offices for a couple months in order to train. So I say this to say that many times when I listen to young entrepreneurs tell me what they want to raise money to do, I find that 95% of the time there are other resourceful ways of getting the same things resolved without using money. For technology startups, one common thing, for example, is finding an engineer paying for software development help. And I always say, that is one of those things that should be a core part of your team, right? If a member of your team cannot write the technology or the app for free, it really gets to the heart of whether what you're building is a technology business that can evolve quickly, depending on how technology intensive it's expected to be. So if you get somebody on your team who can write that code for equity, then you don't need to go and raise money to hire developers in order to do so. So these are like practical approaches to getting over the initial hump. The second thing I like to remind people about funding is that business people, investors, even myself, we rarely fund ideas. Very, very rarely. For me, even in my own, even as quote unquote big as I am, whenever I'm building a new project, I still have to use my own money to validate that the idea is working before I will be taken seriously by any investor. Except for a very few number of people who have the gift of additional gab, so to speak, it's very rare that you just get funded on the basis of an idea. You have to be very focused on execution so that you can show some results, right? And it's those results that then open up the gateway of funding to you. So again, back to my first point, think very, very carefully and resourcefully about how you would fund what I would call your pilots. How would you fund a demonstration of the fact that this is doable, right? Then the final thing I would say when it comes to funding is very much like Auntie Ndidi said, is integrity. Everybody is starts off the same way when it comes to this fundraising business, which is you have no contacts, you have nobody to necessarily fund you. You might come upon a few people who might be willing to take a chance on you, but it's really down to those people, and that will be after you get a lot of no's. However, when you now get that yes, what do you do with the yes? It's a very important question. One of the defining experiences that I've had, and a lot of people might not actually know this, but it's one of the reasons why a lot of people feel comfortable funding me again and again and again. It was when I was starting out with Andela. So before Andela, we had this company called Fora. And what we were doing at Fora was we're selling e-learning courses to working professionals. It was a completely different business. But the business it was okay, but it wasn't necessarily doing super well. It wasn't like a high growth business. Now, I was within my rights to say, oh, look, this investment that we did together did not work. So I'm leaving to go and start Andela, which was a completely different business from what we were doing. But against my better judgment, to be very honest, I didn't do that, right? I decided that I was going to pull along with me investors from Andela. And as I was telling them, look, I am going to build this new business called Andela since this business called Fora didn't work. Please, if you want, you can double down in this company, but this is the portion of the company that I've been given, and this is your portion from my shares. Now, those shares today are worth millions, not because they invested in Andela, but because they invested in the business before Andela, and from an abundance of integrity, I decided to carry them over into the new company because I felt that abandoning my investors at that time was not the right thing to do. Logically, you could make the argument that I could have gone the legal way and say, look, we tried out the business. That's why you're an equity holder. It didn't work. But I decided to do the moral thing and carry them along. And those investors till today, they are reliable first checks for any business I choose to do. If many times they would even wire me the money before they receive documents because they know as far as Inioluwa is concerned, we will be made whole. And we've done a whole lot of stuff together. I've made them back their money not once, not twice, many, many different times. So that integrity of treating investors' capital as sacred, like your own, is really the key to unlocking funding sustainably over a long period of time. Of course, to get there, you will get through many no's. A lot of people would tell you no. Some people will tell you yes. But how you treat those people who eventually bet on you is everything when it comes to an investor-investee relationship.
Very, very, very insightful, actually. So just to add a bit more, or to request for a bit more, most of the investments that we seem to know or hear about are foreign, right? Why is the focus mostly on foreign investors and the local funding sources and the local investors who also invest in businesses? What really is this whole Series A, Series B, Series C concept? Are there milestones that qualify businesses, these foreign investments? Just a bit more light on it, so at least people are pretty clear. We're already clear on what it takes, but just a bit more light on it.
Sure. I can explain how it works. So first of all, I think the context here is technology companies, right? So it's important to state that. I would argue that for many other kinds of businesses, you're probably better off working with local investors, like real estate, agri. They understand those. We're just starting to see kind of the first wave of local investors who understand the technology asset class in the way that it's originally understood to be. But most of the people who have experience with the asset class and can add real value are foreign, right? There's a lot of local angels that are very good, but formal technology venture funds, they're very few. So that's why a lot of people are more focused on the foreign funding sources because they are the ones who understand the technology asset class. And you never want to take money from an investor who doesn't understand the business you are in. They will require a lot of work to manage and they won't necessarily be able to add as much value to your business. So it's always important to look for investors who understand the technology asset class, if that's what you're into. So just setting that context. In terms of rounds, so the way it works in the technology space, there's an acknowledgement that in order for you to grow fast, you're going to require some funding. And because technology growth is geometric. I don't know how many of us studied math in school, but there's geometric progression and there is arithmetic progression, right? Arithmetic progression is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Geometric progression is 1 times 1. You understand what I'm saying? Right. Technology is geometric in the sense that, is really a 2 times 2 times 2 times, you know what I mean? 2 times 4 times 6 times 8 times, you understand what I'm saying? So it's very geometric, it grows very fast. Because it grows very fast, it requires a significant amount of funding upfront because the ultimate goal is that it's in the mass that you're able to get the value, so to speak. So if, for example, we use a church, if I wanted to VC fund a church, right? I want a church that will grow from 2 members to 8 members to 64 members to 126 members every Sunday. You are adding, just to use a more practical example, as opposed to a church that is growing, 1, 2 members, 4 members, 5 members, 6 members, like that, right? So because of that, if you're going to be growing members geometrically every Sunday, it wouldn't make sense for you to start in somebody's living room past a certain point, right? You would want to build a big stadium, because in 4 Sundays, you are going to need, you understand what I'm trying to say? So just so that you can picture why people raise money. It's not because they are, a lot of people have this misconception that people raise money because they are eating inside. It's really not true. It's because you're growing so fast, you need to make provision for the growth that you're expected to experience. So when you raise money, what happens is, at the seed level, there's a certain amount of money that's provisioned for you to grow to a certain stage. Now, when you get to that stage, keep in mind that because your growth is geometric, your rate of growth will also increase astronomically. So you need to raise further funding for you to be able to manage that growth until the next stage. And the series keep going and going and going until you either decide you want to stop, or somebody buys your business because of how fast it's going, or you decide to IPO. That means you go from being privately funded to being funded by anybody in the public, right? So that's really how the series, this series funding work. And again, I say this because it's in the technology context that this is true. I don't think this would be true, say, in housing or in agric or something like that.
Okay. Amazing. Indeed, you alluded to something earlier on around being careful about your equity partners. So I wanted to ask the question: how does one choose a co-founder? How does one choose the right equity partners? What should entrepreneurs look out for? Maybe you could just tell us, how did you manage through your own experience? How does one choose the right equity partner? So you're not in business today and tomorrow you've been bought out and you're completely out in the cold.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd actually like to follow up on a couple of things that E talked about before I add that one. The first one is there is funding locally. I mentioned the Lagos Angel Network. There's also the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, and there are angels everywhere. So for Ace Foods, when we decided to buy our factory, we actually did a private placement, which means that we actually raised money from friends and family in a structured way. So we sold a portion of our business to others. And because my husband is my co-founder, the co-founder of the company, and he has a finance background, we could do it ourselves. And what we did was to basically find people who were passionate about the business and were willing to invest in us. And this points to the issue that E talked about. People don't invest in ideas, they invest in people. They invest in people. They know that the idea that you started with is not the idea you're going to end up with. As you refine your business model, it will keep changing. When we started Ace Foods, our first product were going to be jams and pepper sauces. We actually won the business plan competition based on our jams and pepper sauces. Today, we don't produce either jams or pepper sauces. Our biggest product mixes are spices and seasonings. And people invested in us because they believe that we're people of integrity, people who will reinvent themselves, people who will respond to the changing times, people who will evolve, and that by putting their money in us, they could trust us. Now, as you're also investigating in the Nigerian context who you should take money from, whether it's your uncle or brother, sister, you structure it, meaning you have a formal contract. You agree on the terms of the engagement. You agree on whether they get a board seat or not. And there's no direct link. They don't always need to get board seats. You agree on their exit. And if it's a loan or an equity investment, many people take these things for granted. They say, oh, it's my uncle. I've known him for a long time. I'll give him 50% of my company for 2 million naira. What is the value of your company? How do you know that 50% is worth 2 million naira? So I've heard horror stories from people who have taken these things for granted. And then they take on very, very bad investors. And in one case, this investor actually has taken over my friend's company. And the investor is a thug in a suit. Because when you hear about the investor, you don't realize that the person is like, celebrated in society, but is actually a thug. And so the challenge for us is, how are you structuring every aspect of your business? What systems and structures have you put in place to value your business? And in that sense, debt or equity, you have to value them. Some types of investments, as I said, are expensive. I wouldn't. People have been approaching us to invest in our company, and we've been like, no, for now we don't want any equity investors because we feel like debt is going to be a cheaper option for us now than equity. So you have to actually look at consider your options. And the most important thing in picking investors is values of integrity, values. Is the person committed to helping you grow? Are they in this for the right reason? How desperately do they need the money they're giving you? If they need that money, please don't take it from them, because you need patient capital. Patient capital is people who are willing to wait. And in our case, it was patient capital. So they can give you the money, and for the next 10 years, that money they don't need it to eat or to pay their rent. And then you have to report. So on a quarterly basis, we send them reports on how the business is doing. Where dividends are available, we give them dividends. So I think it's really important you manage those relationships, because those are the people who will be with you in the next business. They will be with you. They will be the ones talking you up. They'll be the ones screaming at the rooftops about how committed and how capable you are. And I just feel like some of us are too casual about our valuations and too casual about who we surround ourselves with. And we take it for granted that, there's a difference between business is business, family is family, friends are friends. And everything has to be documented. If it is not documented, it did not happen. That's a rule. Every organization that I work in, if it wasn't recorded, it didn't happen. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So keep that at the back of your mind.
Wow, that's so insightful. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. Okay, let's take one more question, and then we move towards the questions that have to do more with scaling. We observe the trend amongst entrepreneurs giving preference to company registration, overseas. I mean, like Delaware, rather than locally. What benefits are accruable for registrations done overseas as against locally? Why do you think this is a is a growing trend? And do you want to take that first and let Ndidi conclude?
Again, I feel like this is very, very specific to the technology industry.
Okay.
And it's also specific to its own funding sources. So, like I said, there are a few organizations that can fund a technology business to understand the asset class.
Okay.
And so if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build a business, that is going to be looked upon favorably by funding sources in markets where that asset class is understood, it makes sense for you to incorporate in Delaware. And so that's why entrepreneurs do it. In fact, to be very specific, people do it primarily because their first funding is coming from an investor who insists that they do so. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So it's a very specific kind of situation with the tech industry, where US investors, by virtue of their, fortunately or unfortunately, by virtue of their charters, we call it the LPA agreement, they're not allowed to invest outside of the US because they're taking money from US venture funds, and US, that the US doesn't allow them to invest in companies outside of the US. Also, I mean, but the long-term benefits, like you asked, the US is the deepest pool of capital in the world. So you obviously have that kind of access to capital. Also, I think if you're an honest entrepreneur, it is also one of the most difficult places to be a compliant business person, because they don't play with their laws. You can get arrested for doing things in a funny way. So surviving in an environment that shows investors from all over the world that you have nothing to hide. And then obviously there are certain ease of doing business elements to it. I mean, you can incorporate. If you tell me today you want to incorporate a Delaware company, If you're willing to pay the right price, which is not more than $2,000, I can have one ready for you by 5 o'clock today.
Wow.
Which which is not the case with many other jurisdictions around the world. So I think that's what some people are looking at when they make that decision to invest in to go incorporate their companies in Delaware.
Okay. Did any take from you?
Yes. I would actually say that for my industry, you should not incorporate in Delaware. If you're in agriculture and food sector and the real sector, please stay away from the US. As someone who pays taxes in the US, I can tell you that, like E said, the compliance level is extremely high. The tax authorities will find you till the end of the earth. And the requirements are very, very high. I think in the Nigerian context, you have a lot more concessions for startups in this environment. Our tax regime is strict, and we do have multiple taxation in Nigeria. But if you add up all the taxes, it's still less than what you'll be paying in America. Corporate tax in America is quite high, and employee, payee, what we call payee in Nigeria, employee tax is about 30%, 30 to 40%. Nigerians, compliant Nigerians, if you add everything, it's about 16%. So I'm just saying, let's think through what your business model is, what makes sense for you from an investor perspective. But if you're in the real sector in Nigeria, I think it makes sense to incorporate in Nigeria.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so let's look a bit more into the questions that have to do with established entrepreneurs who want to scale. And now there's a question that talks about how does a company get listed on an exchange, whether locally or offshore? What steps should be taken to nurture the company to that point? At what point does a company qualify to be listed, on the exchange? Just so that those who have that as a long-term strategy, know what to do and how they should be preparing, towards, moving their company to that stage. Ndidi, you want to take it up first?
Sure. So I have not listed any companies on the exchange, but I've sat on boards of companies that are listed. I sit on the board of Nigerian Breweries. I used to sit on the board of Nestle and Cornerstone Insurance. And I'd say for starters, as an entrepreneur, you have to be ready to be exposed in ways you never imagined if you're going to be listed. So while the Nigerian Stock Exchange currently has this whole program where they're trying to get SMEs listed, being listed puts you under tremendous pressure around reporting, around your exposure in terms of your stock price and what drives the stock price and the market forces, as well as the regulatory environment from the NSE itself. So you have to be ready for that type of pressure and scrutiny. If you thought you already faced pressure before, you don't realize the type of pressure you'll be under, especially with the new regulatory environment that we've entered. That said, it's a good way to raise funding, right? If you feel like your company is big enough that you do want to go and raise external funding, it's a good way to do that. But there's tremendous pressure, and then you're going to need to put in place a lot of systems and structures that ordinarily you would not imagine, even in terms of who's on your board, your company secretary. To be a board member for these listed companies, I've had to take tests. Many of you will not know. I actually have written books on governance and boards, but I actually had to go and study for those tests because people fail. Wow. People fail the test. You have to, as a board member, you have to be, you have to be one step ahead of it. So I would say in the Nigerian context, look at it, but do talk to companies that have listed and try to understand their experiences. There are other ways to raise external funding without listing. Listing is a good option, and actually the stock exchange welcomes it right now. So if you go on their website, you'll see the whole initiative they have for SMEs that enables them to list. But I'll talk to E. Maybe he has a listed company that he can share.
E, can you tell us a bit more?
Well, okay. I mean, just there are kind of two elements to it, in my opinion. First of all, is do you look like a listed company? And then the second thing is really kind of the specific processes that you have to take to be listed. For generally speaking, I mean, I also have not listed a company. However, I've helped some companies list or advise some companies that are listing, and I also sit on the board of a listed company in Nigeria. So I've been able to kind of see how it works from behind the scenes. I think and also I have both companies that I've founded have considered listing at some point, and it may be in one or two of their plans at some point in the future. So I've started on board meetings where this is a priority for the management. So I mean, so the first thing is really, does your company look like a listed company, right? So the first key thing is what we call your revenues have to be extremely predictable. I apologize, sorry. Predictable revenue, right? So like, what does your predictable revenue look like? So because listed companies don't really have a lot of room for they don't have a lot of room for like variance, so to speak. You can't just be spiking up and down. There's a level of predictability you have to have in your revenues for you to be considered listed. Then your executive team, are they people who have had experience? Because just like Ndidi mentioned, you're going to have to report things a specific way, manage things a specific way. You have to have very clear processes. You have to look a certain way to be listed in terms of your executive team, particularly your CFO, right? Has to be somebody who has that experience of reporting for a listed company. This is extremely important. The third element of that is really thinking carefully about the interest of your investors, right? So obviously, the reason why people list is because they want to raise external capital. But nowadays, that's less the reason. Usually, it's because they want to provide liquidity to your investors and to your employees. There are certain kinds of investors who have a huge leg up when it comes to preparing companies for listing. And you probably want to get those type of investors as close to the finish line as possible, right? So, the likes of TPG are very well versed in helping companies list. The likes of Helios have done a really good job of helping companies who want to list. So you want to think carefully about bringing on those type of investors to kind of help you and beat you up into the shape where it makes sense for you to list. And then obviously you have to identify the process itself is fairly long-winded and it will take some time. But what happens typically is that, first of all, you have to determine where you want to list. So you can decide you want to list in Nigeria. Like Anthony said, the NSE has good programs, but there are also other programs that you can leverage. Like there's also there are other programs. It's fine if you want to come. I have to turn off my videos. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, while he tries to take care of domestic issues, let's just quickly move on. There is another interesting insight when you look into the business climate in Nigeria, and I'd just quickly like to ask you the question, Ndidi. There are very few multi-generational businesses within this environment. When we say multi-generational, you see businesses that are handed over from father to son, son to son, grandson, and things like that. And though our cultural values around family, family is quite strong. We do not see this cascaded into the business environment like we see in other climes, like in Europe, in Asia, and things like that. What do you think is responsible for this trend, and how can we change this narrative where businesses, transcend, those who started them and are handed down, 30, 40, 50 years, as the case may be? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much for that question. One of the reasons I started Leap Africa was exactly because of this reason. In 1997, as a first-year student at Harvard Business School, I got a magazine in my box that said 100 Indian companies over 100 years old. And I started thinking about Nigeria, even the whole continent of Africa, and I couldn't think of 100 companies that were over 100 years old. And the truth is, most companies globally die with their founders, most. Only 30% of global companies survive until the second generation, and the third generation is even lower. And the reason for that, after we did the research, and we've now written 2 books about it, please go and get those books, entrepreneurs. The first one is called Defying the Odds, Case Studies of Nigerian Companies That Have Survived Generations. And the second one is called Passing the Baton. And these are written by Leap Africa. and I'll type them into the chat box. Now, what did we find? We found that number one, a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about succession. You have to think about succession the day you start your company. The day you start your company, think about when you're going to step out. And you don't need to step out when you're old and gray. You need to step out when you're tired, when you're bored, when your skills are no longer relevant, or when you're being called by God to do something else, which means you have to have people willing and able to take over from you. Now, many of us don't think about succession. And any successful business has to think about succession from day one because anything can happen. When I started Leap Africa, 4 years in, my husband got shot and I had to leave the country really suddenly. The board members stepped in to take care of that company. And that's the second thing. Beyond having a succession plan is having a strong board. One of the board members, Dr. Nadu Denloye, actually played a role, started coming into the company 3 days a week for free to stabilize the company. If we did not have that board, Leap Africa would have died. Today, Leap Africa is 18 years old and works in 6 African countries. I don't run it anymore. It's on its third succession, and I sit on the board. I'm not even the board chair. So we have proven that in the Nigerian context, you can build companies that will survive you. If something happened to me today, Leap will continue because I'm no longer running it day to day. And that's what we have to think about is the first, having a succession plan. Second, having a strong governance structure. Third, putting in place systems and structures that don't revolve around you. Yesterday, E and I were on a conversation about institutions and building institutions in Nigeria. And I said that why institutions are so weak in Nigeria is because they revolve around individuals. No institution that revolves around an individual will succeed. We need institutions that revolve around a business idea and a business concept. And we need institutions that can, if Ndidi is not there, many of us, and we'll be honest, if we run businesses, that our customers say, if Ndidi is not there, I don't want to deal with you. If where is the Oga? And in my own context, even with my consulting firm, I've made it clear that if you cannot deal with other senior leadership, then you don't want to do business with us because I am not going to be on every single project. And now we have an Abuja office and we've expanded, right? And I'm not in the Abuja office, but the Abuja office is running really well. It's because of systems and structures. And then the last thing I'll say is values. We don't define our values as entrepreneurs. Some of us have mission statements, vision statements, but we haven't thought about values. Values are non-negotiable. I want every organization I've started to have the same values. I'll use an example. One value I have is that I have all the organizations I've started are meritocracies. You know what a meritocracy is? You move up based on merit, right? So one way that we dispel that myth, everybody calls me Ndidi, even the driver, everybody calls me Ndidi. Do you understand? And so if you come in and you're maybe 50 years old, you're a factory manager, they will call you by your first name, Femi. And if you don't like to be called by your first name, you can't work in my companies. Why? Because we're trying to show that really there's no difference between someone who's 50 and someone who's 20. It's about what you deliver, what ideas you're bringing to the table. And that's so uncomfortable for some people. They come in and they're like, these young people calling me by my first name, some of them could be my children. I'm like, in this company, all of us are the same. We are on the same level. We are peers. And we're going to treat each other with respect. Nobody is carrying your bag from the car to come into the office. Do you understand? That meritocracy, those values, I'm just using meritocracy as an example. Integrity, zero tolerance for bad behavior. If you lie, you're out. If you steal, you're out. So if those are values that are passed down from generation, 5 generations later, those values survive the test of time. And so for me, you have to be deliberate. Please get the book, Passing the Baton and Defying the Odds. And in all those books, we talk about Punch newspapers. Punch newspapers have survived very sudden deaths of their founder. They still survive till today. That's an example. Even 7-Up Bottling Company. I mean, there are practical stories that people shared about their challenges building companies that have outlived their founders, but they're amazing stories, even in the Nigerian context. So be inspired by the examples of others to put in place the system structures to make sure that your company outlives you.
Okay. Hello. Sorry. Hello, I'm back, but I missed that question. Part of it, I had to just I had to manage
Not a
my.
problem.
Okay.
Not,
Did you want me to continue where I stopped, or do you? We can just move on if you want.
oh, no,
However you want.
no, we could just move on. But let me ask the question that indeed he has just responded to in a little different way, so you can give
Yeah.
your perspective to it. So we've seen, in the last 10 years or more, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and it's been an obvious trend now for entrepreneurs to start, grow, and sell their business or stakes in the business and move on to something else. And we're still talking about businesses that transcend one generation to another. How do you see this new approach affecting that whole trend? And also, at what point is it necessary for someone um, to hand over their businesses and move on to something else? At what point? So maybe you might have some experience because of a bit of your background and having moved on a bit and around. At what point do you decide to do that?
Yeah.
And how do you see that affecting multi-generational businesses?
Yeah, I think it's important for businesses to become a student as quickly as possible. So I'm particularly brutal in this respect. I leave my businesses. I have a timeline of 36 months for any business I start, and I start counting from the day I enter. I have a resignation letter always in my inbox, and I set a bunch of milestones within which I must leave the business. Because I mean, the way I think about it, anything that has a beginning must have an end, right? That's how we keep things sustainable. And what also helps me quite a bit is the fact that our businesses are very institutionalized by virtue of venture capital. So, because there's a lot of people with capital in the business, they're incentivized to basically ensure that the business continues to go on, regardless of what circumstantial issues happen. And aspect in the sense that I always have teams ready to take over. I have leadership ready to take over as soon as possible once certain milestones have hit. For me, the decision that I make in terms of when it's time for me to do that, to leave the company is really a couple things. Number one, is my specific expertise required in that company? And I ask myself that question the moment that I can take a 3 month if quote unquote vacation, because you never really stop working longer than 6 weeks without the company going into any serious crisis, right? So I typically take a long study leave, quote unquote, before I leave the company, so that I test whether the company actually does need me to be there on a day-to-day. The second question I ask is do they have enough resources to weather whatever storms are going to come over the next at least 24. So I make sure able to architect the firm as he wanted. And then finally, the question is, um, am I, am my services needed elsewhere? I'm a very young person. I'm not even 30 yet. I tried to retire, it didn't work for me. So I realized that there's an opportunity time. If I'm now the founder, that means there's work that I'm going to have to weigh that in the decision of whether it's extremely important that we that as we think about transitioning, does your successor have the resources to be successful? Right? If not, you should stay on and make sure they do. And then the third thing is obviously, what's the opportunity cost of sitting where you are, instead of transitioning to something new. And I'm sure God would also speak to us because it's a very spiritual decision, the decision to leave. For many people, especially in our culture, the expectation is that it's your company. right? How can you leave? But there's no. But I think when you look at these things as assignments, it's just like the Church of God. There's no. I hate it when people call it a church. I go to Foursquare. Our church is a very constitutional church. So from a very early age, we've been told human beings don't own church, right? It's only God. So anytime you understand? When you go, some people do it. They have a system for companies and institutions to remain from generation to generation.
Great. Okay. Let's talk about affiliations, franchises, and white labeling. Okay. Given the prospect of our markets and environment, I mean, we see an influx of foreign players coming into this market. What's your opinion on collaboration, affiliations, and franchises? I mean, yes, we have people who have ideas. We have people who are already in businesses, but there are also opportunities for affiliations, franchises for those who are not in this market, white labeling of products or solutions, as the case may be. What's your opinion about those approaches for entrepreneurs for launching, as regards to entrepreneurs who want to get into that space? Did you?
So I would really say it depends on what your motivation is. Remember, we said that you have to come in wanting to solve a problem or to create value. And I would say that people have had mixed experiences with franchises. Some people very positive and some people very negative. Because there's a startup franchise fee you have to pay. And there are quite a few requirements around buying inputs, buying products, buying services, and then obviously profit sharing. And as an entrepreneur, you have to look at the full spectrum. It hurts me. I was reflecting on this the other day that about 15 years ago, a Stanford professor came to Nigeria and she said, I love Mr. Biggs. Their meat pie is so amazing. She said, you guys should take this as a franchise model all over Africa and to the United States. Today, Mr. Biggs, I don't know. I don't even know if I've seen a Mr. Biggs recently. And yet we see in our backyard, we see Domino's, we see KFC. And that makes me very, very sad because I feel like we've missed out on opportunities to actually create brands that we can franchise to the rest of the world. And brands that where it's a reverse type of relationship. And so what I would suggest, and the truth is, if you ask Mr. Biggs, they might even say that it was the franchising that hurt their growth. I'll let them tell their story, because a lot of people who get into these businesses don't really get in for the right reasons. So you have to be very clear about your rationale, how restrictive some of these partnerships are, what is in it for you, the break-even point, and your own assessment of the market. I know many people have said they want to bring in McDonald's into Nigeria, they want to bring in Starbucks into Nigeria. And I often say that you're appealing to 1% of the population who values and understands those brands. Meanwhile, there are vast opportunities for us to displace imports in so many other spectrums. And so I would like us to reframe our mindset and say, what can we source locally that we can provide for this local market? And I think this is a unique time for Nigerian entrepreneurs. So I just tell you a quick story. I mentioned that our business model was supposed to start with jams and pepper sauces because I used to see Tabasco sauce everywhere. I'd go to restaurants in Lagos and I'd see Tabasco sauce. I don't know if any of you have tasted Tabasco sauce, but it's the most awful thing ever. I hate it, right? And yet we have the best pepper in Nigeria. We have so many types of pepper, red pepper, chili pepper in Nigeria. And I was wondering, why can't we make tomato pepper sauce that we can, export, that we can displace all the restaurants in Nigeria that have Tabasco? And guess what? Yes, restaurants were like, no, we prefer Tabasco. We're not going to buy your pepper sauce. But then we started going to companies and asking them, what is it that you're importing? And they told us spices. So guess what? We shifted from our year 1 strategy to our year 3 strategy. And now we supply spices in bulk, 25 kg sacks, to companies that were importing these spices who are now sourcing proudly Nigerian products. And during this COVID-19, some of the people who refused to buy from us, who were still importing spices, are now buying from us because the Naira is valued, they can clear the products, and we're experiencing significant growth in demand. And so I will challenge every entrepreneur to think locally. What can you source locally? What are we importing that we need to produce here? And how can we change the landscape so that people want our franchises instead of the other way around? But I'm sure EE has a different response.
Well, EE, let's hear your response.
Well, I mean, actually, funny enough, I share your thoughts, Auntie, especially when it comes to franchises. I just like in Nigeria, they don't quite work because they require an understanding of the brand by the local environment. What often ends up happening with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they end up subsidizing marketing for these global brands in the name of franchising. But I think it's also important that we think about global connections and global alliances, primarily from two different angles. Number one, if we want to export, right, we need to start thinking about trust. It's a very important aspect of exporting. We have to be honest, it's very, very difficult to build trust in a Nigerian brand these days, right? So there might be some sense in doing that if you're exporting, because you're exporting to a brand that is well known. And so for partnerships, I would always say, look at it from that perspective. The other side of it is also that if there's some sort of technical expertise that is lacking locally, and there is quite a bit in many respects, right? It might make sense for you to partner with a global giant who can fill that gap. And you know, that was one thing I've definitely realized with Andela. We had a number of partnerships with global companies and global learning companies, and that really helped our growth as a company. So I think it's very much like what Auntie said, which is, you know, how are you thinking about the decision to franchise? How are you thinking about the decisions to partner? What is in it for you? What gap are they filling for you, right? If it's just simply to say as a reputational thing, there's smarter ways to do it. Don't do it in such a way that you're subsidizing or marketing the company locally at your own expense, right? Globally, I can see a very good case for it. If you want to build trust in a product globally, it might be necessary for you to work with a global brand to be able to do so.
Okay, wow. Really insightful. So we're going to touch on a few more questions because time is moving so fast, but it's been so much of learning actually. Let's quickly take this question, and I'll come back to you again on this one. I mean, Indeed had alluded to it earlier on about leveraging technology when she answered the question around ideation earlier on. We see there are a lot of tech-based businesses, you know, currently, and what they call digital natives, and they're becoming the order of the day, and entrepreneurs have been encouraged to explore this route because even as a result of the pandemic, physical contact is further de-emphasized. In your opinion, what are the critical success factors for such organizations, and how should they scale? So, you know, you're a digital native. I mean, so how do you, now you, I mean, just having your platform online, and how do you scale? You know, if that's the type of business that you run, you know, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, well, first of all, I think it's important to understand why a lot of people are pushing on this digital narrative, so that you know why you're being encouraged in that direction. And I think it really revolves around barriers to entry. When you think about the kind of business that Auntie Ndidi does, it's for serious people. I'm not saying my business is not for serious people, but I mean, buying a factory is not something that you just think about in your apartment and you get to it, right? You need to be somebody that is a serious person. Very different from maybe an app that does delivery or something like that, you know? Very different sets of concerns, very different sets of requirements, very different sets of considerations that you're going to make. However, what it ultimately ends up as is that the barrier to entry with any other kind of business is much, much lower than the barriers to entry with tech. Sorry, the barriers to entry tech are much lower than barriers to entry in other businesses. That said, tech is lower. So that said, I mean, when you're thinking about tech as a business, bringing technology and innovation into your business, I think it's helpful to think about, as we've kept repeating, what problem you're trying to solve, and also what kind of problems technology can help you solve. I find a lot of people don't think about the second thing, good at solving problems that require. So for example, right? How do I sell pepper? I have unlimited supply of pepper, but how do I get pepper in the hands of 10,000 homes across Lagos, right? The traditional pepper seller in the market can only sell to people who come to the markets. Do you understand what I'm saying? They cannot sell to 10,000 homes, no matter how much supply they have. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
However, somebody who is selling pepper online, right, can sell to 10,000 homes because it's simply a function of how many people are able to get on their phone and order the pepper to their house and pay for it. It's out of their house, go to the market. If everybody in the market was coming, you understand what I'm saying? So technology example to use might be banking, for example. I always use this joke. There are about 4,000. I mean, I think I when I did a survey for my last church growth retreat, we realized that I think we had more church branches and house fellowship centers than there were bank branches in Nigeria, right? Right. So there are only about 5,000 bank branches in Nigeria. We have about 4,500 churches. Then maybe if you had house fellowship centers, you'll be getting to about 8,000 points of service, right? Banks are roughly about banks are roughly about 5,000, right? If you look at, there are about 33 million registered bank account holders in Nigeria with BVN, unique bank account holders, right? If all those 33 million people went to the bank, how many years would it take them to get served? Have you ever thought about it like that?
Right.
If you divide them equally, 3 million, and don't forget, most of these banks are in Lagos. About 75% of these banks are in Lagos, right? Bank branches, they're in Lagos. They're not anywhere else in the country. So that just gives you an example of where technology can then step in with financial inclusion to ensure that the 33 million people don't have to cram themselves into 5,000 branches that are not very big in this case in order to get access to banking services. So why do I say this? I say this to make the point that as we think about our business, we need to think about technology in the context of helping us solve size and scale challenges, right? We shouldn't think about technology as a be-all, end-all. It should be a platform for growing our business. Now, in terms of practical steps, I will always advise to people, my advice to people is building technology is a complex process. Building good technology is even more complex. Try and leverage platforms. It's not the kind of investment that an individual should be making. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. It really is not. So I see a lot of small businesses, they say they want to go and do e-commerce sites. That's nice. But I would always say, look, before you truly understand whether or not your customers require from you an e-commerce site, why not leverage Jumia? Why not leverage all the stores? There's Paystack Commerce, there's Flutterwave stores. There's so many different forms that you can use. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Right.
You should only leverage technology if you have a scale and distance challenge that technology can help you solve. So that's how to think about it.
Wow, that's so insightful. It should be for scaling, Okay. So because of time, and I think we're already at 1:30, and we just have 30 more minutes, and we still have a lot of questions. But let's see if we can, increase our pace as fast as possible.
Right.
I want to touch on a softer issue on one side, and I want Ndidi to help us with this before he chips in. So the question goes thus: it says that how should an entrepreneur navigate the growth phase? And manage the competence of the team for the next phase versus loyalty. So let's say an organization is going into its next phase, and the competency of the team, would not fit with what is required for that phase. How do we manage, the team vis-a-vis loyalty, especially if some of these team members in question were foundational staff? How do you navigate through such a softer issue? Let's hear you, Ndidi.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I have been reading a lot about managing teams, and I read a book called The Team Player, and it says there are three things you need in amazing team members. The first one is hunger, the second is humility, and the third is emotional intelligence. Hunger, humility, and emotional intelligence. And the truth is, when we think about our organization and our staff, and actually if we plot our staff against these three very simple indicators, we'll find out that the best performers are hungry, they are humble, and they have emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And when we consider our team members, we have to consider them within the current phase of the organization and the future phase of the organization. And what I say as a Christian is that sometimes I have to exit people into their destiny. So it's a very difficult decision, but you're exiting them into their destiny, meaning they're not supposed to be in your organization, but you're going to give them the support they need to move on to the next level. So one of the things I do religiously at Sahel is that I invest in training my people. And I'm not just training them for my purposes, I'm training them for their future. Many people are not going to grow with your organization, but you can help them find their life's purpose, and you can help them move into the next phase of their development outside your organization. But you have to be ruthless as an entrepreneur. So to surround yourself with mission-driven high achievers who are hungry, who are humble, and who have emotional intelligence. Otherwise, you're going to pull your hair out. I have a rule, and people think I'm tough, but I have a rule. If I lose sleep for 3 nights because of you, you can't be on my team. I'm literally not sleeping because of something you've done or not done that has set us back. And a reputation can be destroyed in 5 minutes, a reputation of 10 years, because a team member you invested in, you believed in, destroyed that reputation. So I definitely, please do not sacrifice loyalty, or do not put loyalty over competence. And I didn't even say skills. Remember the 3 things I talked about? I didn't talk about skills. I said hunger. If they're hungry enough, they will build the skills. If they're humble enough, they will learn. They will position themselves to do whatever it takes to achieve the mission and objectives of the organization. If they have emotional intelligence, they know how to work with others. So loyalty for me is great, but you can be loyal and supportive of me outside the organization. And I'll help you do that. So that's my response. I don't know if E has a different one.
Let's put the question to you let's put the question to you this way. What are non-negotiables for you when you're building teams? Because I know you talked about having a great team earlier on today. What are non-negotiables for you when building teams?
I mean, I'll be very honest with you. I think maybe because I'm in a different phase of my life from Auntie, I'm a bit softer on the loyalty question. Yeah.
Okay.
So I prize loyalty extremely. I think mostly because I think my own point of view with respect to the people who help you build organizations is that there's a place for everybody, right? Obviously, there's a need to bring in competent people, but I find that oftentimes just being able to have competent people who are driven by things that may not necessarily be always the same as what you care about is not enough. I've found a lot of organizations mission drift as a result of competence. It's not over competence, or just competence, right? Just, people are doing their jobs, but in doing their jobs, They're robbing people of they rob the organization of soul, quote unquote. It's a more softer issue. So for me, I think the number one thing when I'm looking for team members is a dedication to mission, right? Literally, in the earlier stages of my businesses, I make people live in the same house. That's how inane I am about dedication to mission. Like, you leave your house and you live with me. We need to be able to spend a lot of time together and be as passionate about what we're pushing forward as everybody else. I prize that over even competence. I prize that even above, to some extent, loyalty to me, because loyalty to me is not even important to me, but loyalty to the mission is extremely important. That you care about the customers that we are working with, and that you understand what is at stake with serving them is extremely important to me. The second thing that I appreciate is a learning culture, right? So if I see improvements every day, if I work with you, I'm actually pretty forgiving of mistakes, because my experience has been, I guess I also maybe because I'm young, most things can be fixed, to be very honest, right? Especially if intention is not completely lost in that omission, so to speak, or in commission, right? If the person's heart is in the right place, most of these issues can be fixed. And obviously, I'm looking for them not to make that same mistake again, right? That's the most important thing. And then the last thing I look for in my team members is I really like underdogs. I really like other people have said, you're disqualified from doing this because of something. I really appreciate identifying talent with potential, perhaps even more so than I appreciate working with talent that already knows what they're doing. Now, that's not to say I wouldn't hire talent that doesn't already know what they're doing. But what I've done in my own organizations, at least the ones I ran directly, is that I'll bring them in as advisors. I'll bring them in as senior managers on a contract. But I love to build teams with a lot of room to grow, and that will grow with me. I mean, the people I've worked with in my companies have been with me for 10 years, and they're my age. So we've all grown old together. So I prefer that. And I'm usually very wary of sometimes of bringing in alpha people onto my teams that have no loyalty to me or to the mission, and have what I call the wrong type of ambition, which is an ambition for personal achievement as opposed to for mission and loyalty to the mission.
Okay. It kind of ties in actually with what you said about being hungry, because I mean, if you're actually an underdog, or you've been told before that you're probably a never do well in that area, you probably would want to prove a point, and of course you would throw yourself into it. Okay, let's look at something a little different, but I think it's critical. Yeah, it's a little critical in today's today's entrepreneur and within this environment. Let's look at data. So there is the saying that data is a new currency, data is a new oil, right? So what are the imperatives for data in our environment that is rapidly moving towards digital, even though data seems to be unavailable, and where available, it is fragmented? Ndidi, can you tell us a bit about what you think about that?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I started Nourishing Africa, which is an online digital business, is this issue of data. So every other day, people would write me and say, Ndidi, I need data on rice farming. Ndidi, I need data on maize farming. And I saw someone who says he needs information on snail farming. And so I realized that with Sahel, we were collecting all this data all over Africa, and we needed to put it somewhere, but that there was also data available that people couldn't find. So what we've created is a online hub called nourishingafrica.com. If you're interested in agriculture and food, even if you're a caterer, a chef, a retailer, please go on nourishingafrica.com, upload your profile, and become a member. You'll start getting a lot of support, not just in terms of data, but training and access. And you leverage this to build your business or to start a new business. And it's a free online portal. So I'm marketing it unashamedly today. But beyond that, what I realized is that all of us entrepreneurs have data. And the question is, how are you using your data? I'll give an example. I'm sure there are people on this platform. Somebody has written that she has a school, right? So she has data. She doesn't realize she has data. She has data not just on how, when people pay for school fees, how old their children are, when their children were born, what other schools their children have gone to. She has data. If you're someone who makes cakes, you have data. You have data on when I've bought your cakes in the past and what I put on the cake, so that you'll know whether my children's birthday was last week or whether my wedding anniversary is next week. And many of us don't mine this data. We don't mine this data first to assess our customers, to understand how to better engage them, to understand how to serve them. I mean, it blows my mind that all the people I buy cakes from, not one sends me a message saying, we know a birthday is coming up. Do you want to place an order? Not one, not one. Imagine if they did. They would be that loyalty would be for life. I love my sister who has Eventful. Many of you follow Eventful. Many of you follow my other sister who has Sapphire. She recognizes the anniversaries of all of our customers. She has mined that data. For every wedding, she remembers. It's 1 year anniversary, 2 year anniversary, 3 year anniversary. You can mine data. Before you even talk about big data, which I'll leave to E, you can mine data to improve your operations, to reduce your costs, to engage with your suppliers, to interface with stakeholders across the ecosystem. And many of us waste this data. So my first advice to you entrepreneurs is, what are you doing with the data you have? I'm not even asking you to sell that data. What are you doing with it? How are you leveraging it to improve your operations, to improve your approach, to improve the resilience of your business? And what are you going to do differently once you start looking at that data on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis to change course? And I'll leave E to talk about big data, but I'll say, E, my philosophy around people is not very different from yours. After you explained yours, I actually thought that was very similar. So it's really important. Yeah, I think it's very similar, but it's just the nomenclature that we've used that's a bit different. All right, but let me let you take on the second part.
Yeah, so
fantastic.
Go ahead. Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Auntie Diza said everything that needs to be said about data. And whenever we're talking about big data, we have to first of all start by talking about small data, because at the end of the day, that's the level at which most people would actually use it. But I think it bears repeating that, you know, the reality of the way the world works is that data helps us to allocate resources. That's what you know, at the end of the day, that's a summary of the issue. Data helps us to allocate resources. By the time you understand at a deep level, right, who your customer is today, it makes it easier for you to also find people like them. Business is as simple as serving somebody today and finding people who are exactly like them to serve. Because the chances that they're going to have the same problems, the same approach to solving the problems, the same thought process about solving the problems is very, very high. So rather than just shooting a miss when it comes to our marketing, or, you know, doing a lot of things that may not make sense, just being able to mine that small data will give us a sense of where other customers like them are. And there are fantastic tools that people can teach you how to use, like Facebook audience tools, like Google AdWords, where you can now leverage that against the big data that these companies have to then identify customers exactly like the people you're currently selling to already, who are already finding value in the projects that finding value in the products that you're selling today. So it's very critical for you to actually have an understanding of how data directly translates to value in your organization. Another thing I like to say is that data predicts future behavior in interesting ways. So one of the things I like to do actually is whenever I do my performance appraisals, my staff, I like to back and identify where I got that person from. I started that habit at Andela, where I used to rank my the schools where I got my top performing fellows, right, where they graduated from, and then go make sure I visit those schools to make sure I can get more people exactly like them, or better understand why I have people. I have people of that of that kind of that's hue from that directed ways to get talent. I remember because they would actually give you great you know what I mean? And I would tell those professors, please, any great students you have, please send my way. So I think we don't do enough of that feedback looping in our data, where we leverage the data that we have today to understand, okay, what exactly was it that I did that created this good outcome, and then do more of it? What exactly was it that I did to create this bad outcome, and then avoid it? So I think those two things are extremely important for people to take note of. But data is critical to any kind of
business
resource allocation for business today. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's touch on something a little closer to Ndidi's heart. Let's talk about social entrepreneurship. So this is the question actually. We know that in our environment we have several challenges. We're plagued with several challenges, and of course we obviously even need more entrepreneurs to look into that space and effect changes and make impacts. Okay, but how does an entrepreneur manage the fine line between achieving social impact and remaining profitable, or keeping that social enterprise afloat as a company? Indeed, would like to really learn from you, because you have that experience.
So I think in Nigeria, many companies are social enterprises, whether they choose to see themselves as social enterprises or not. The woman who wrote in the chat box who says she has a school, it's a for-profit, but a school is a social enterprise if that school is committed to social change that's making a difference in the lives of millions of people. Now, the challenge for social innovators, social entrepreneurs, is whether they can also be called social innovators. So what's the distinction? So because she owns a school, she is trying to make a difference, improve the lives of young people, help them find their purpose, equip them with the skills. But is she an innovator? An innovator is finding new ways of solving these problems to reach more people, millions of people. And that's what's really going to differentiate a social entrepreneur versus a social innovator in terms of success. And that missing link is how you constantly reinventing your product or services to meet the changing times. I'll give you an example. When I wrote my book, Social Innovation in Africa, I interviewed an entrepreneur in Kenya who has an early childhood education, social innovation. And what does he do? He hires people in the community, right? So they have little schools set up, almost like Bridge International Academies. And they have mamas in the community who provide daycare services for the children. But what is innovative about them? You can pay on a daily basis. So you drop your child, you pay that day 1,000 naira. That completely changes the model. Or you pay 100 naira. And I just thought to myself, why aren't Nigerians setting up similar things in markets all over Nigeria? Markets all over Nigeria, or near factories that don't have creches all over the country, where women can take their child, drop their child, and pay per day. Because most of us are charging per month. We're charging per quarter. So we say, oh, we don't trust Nigerians. They won't pay. Guess what? They have to pay when they're dropping off that child. They will pay, right? Every single day. And so what they saw, it opened up a whole ecosystem around people who just needed place to keep their child every single day, and who were earning daily wages and who couldn't afford to pay on a monthly basis. So for me, a social enterprise has to become an innovation hub where you're constantly redefining your business model and you're looking at ways you can leverage technology, payment systems to appeal to the masses of people. Because what we don't realize is that the poor actually pay more for most products and services than the rest of the middle class and upper middle class, because they have to pay on a daily basis. And our electricity is not provided on a daily basis. Our education, there's nothing that we've done to be able to offer fragmented or payment systems for this population. And I think there's so much opportunity for housing, around water, around sanitation. We haven't even scratched the surface of the potential social innovations that can emerge in our ecosystem if we change our mindset around how we interface with the lowest income populations that we live with on a daily basis.
Great. Okay, so we have just, I think, barely 10, 11 minutes. So we have just two more questions, and of course, I'd like to get the your responses from both of you, because I think they are critical questions that affect entrepreneurs and everybody who is in that space today. So the pandemic has mandated a significant number of companies to create new safety measures for staff, including work from home options. This has further, blurred the line between work and life balance, as the case may be. So, Ndidi, let me start with you as a wife, a mother, an entrepreneur. How have you managed to juggle these roles without anything falling through the cracks? We're coming to you also too, but let's take it for at least from Ndidi, for all of the female folks, for entrepreneurs. You wear all of those caps. You're wearing your cap is multicolored actually. So how have you juggled all of this? And of course, nothing has fallen through the cracks. Just a bit of advice.
I have to be honest, it's been extremely difficult. This has been probably one of the toughest times. And for every entrepreneur, you need to pat yourself on the back that you're still alive, that you're still standing, that you're still paying your staff. I want to applaud you for your fantastic contributions. But that said, I think a lot of us don't ask for help. We don't ask for help. I have to applaud E's wife for ensuring that he is helping with the childcare today. And to applaud E for changing mindsets, right? That yes, a child can be crying for their father and the mom doesn't have to rush to take care. We have to ask for help. I think my sisters out there, we are carrying such a burden trying to be perfect moms and we don't ask for help. And so I have become more vulnerable than ever before to ask for help. And some days I say to the people, I'm not entering the kitchen today. You guys just take care of yourselves. And guess what? I'm not any less of a woman because I just can't be perfect and do everything at the same time. Ask for help. Your spouse is there, you have family, your children. This period, we actually decided that for health reasons, we wouldn't have anybody coming to help us in the house. And it was extremely difficult, right? Because I worked 24 hours a day, but it meant that my children had to step up. And it wasn't easy, right? But guess what? It's the best gift I've given them this COVID is teaching them how to, do what they need to do to live in society. And so many of us are protecting our children from the harsh realities that they're going to face out there. And we're raising spoiled brats. So I had to learn the hard way to involve people. And then the final thing I'll say is give yourself the room to realize that you cannot accomplish everything you've set out to because you're dealing with a health crisis, but also a mental health crisis, an emotional roller coaster, and you're also dealing with so many other uncertainties around your business. So give yourself the breathing room to let yourself realize that some things will fall through the cracks and it is okay to do that. That said, you have to have a schedule and you have to be organized. You have to have a schedule and be organized. Treat your work day as a work day. Get out and set your schedule and get everything you want to do accomplished that day.
Great. Thank you so much for being so transparent, Ndidi. Let's ask the question this way to you. So what we heard here now is that there is no longer anything called work-life balance. What we hear now is work-life integration, which is another interesting twist to it, coupled with the fact that people, work from home. So you sleep, you wake up to your laptop, you sleep back from your laptop, you sleep, you wake up to your laptop. What's your take on that balance? Ndidi has given us her perspective very transparently. What's your take on that balance?
Yeah, I mean, to be very honest with you, I share her perspective in the sense that, it's an incredibly difficult time. You don't have the luxury of being able to be around your team members. So there's quite a bit of recommunication that actually has to go on. You have to also be cognizant of your team members' home dynamic as well, because they're also dealing with issues. So I've definitely been in conversation, which is why I'm very, it's okay for me too, because me and my daughter, we're always at home, we're always together, right? So, I always have to be cognizant of the fact that my other team members are also dealing with the same dynamics as well in their own homes. And so that means certain things might have to be recommunicated. I have to allow for a lot of empathy for everybody. I have to give people time and space, and so on. But I think really, what has really helped, one good thing I'll say is that, whenever you have a team that is very passionate about your mission, about what you're trying to do, like the team I work with today, extremely passionate about democratizing venture capital investment to the average person. When you have a team like that, when your family is bought into the mission, things tend to fall into place, ultimately understand from that perspective, in the sense that if there are issues that pop up, people can understand. So I
He seems to be frozen. Oh dear. I think his network is having a little challenge. Okay, so while we wait for his,
I think there's this element of it that isn't spoken about, concept of work-life integration in a different way, where everybody pays for that context. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. I had to move around a bit. So
yeah, we lost you for a bit. Yeah,
we have to allow space for that context. So for me, for example, I'm in Abuja today, which is why there's so much noise. But I had to bring my family with me on this trip, because I figured, at the end of the day, there was a limit to which I could just be, I could be away from my family. I know that we need help, and I found a way to make it a nice visit for my family, so that at the very least there is both. There's some work, there's work and family balance there, and I think more families are going to have to make decisions like that, where to the extent that it's possible, you might have to carry family with you to work, and you might have to sometimes bring work with you back to family, and everybody would have to understand, because we're all on a journey together. And it's the same with my wife's work. My wife works. She produces a lot of artistic content. We all try to be as helpful to her as we can. We provide space for her to work. The good thing about the times we live in is there are no more gender roles. So everybody, where my wife always jokes that it's my baby, because at the end of the day, whenever she gets antsy like that, I have to be the one to manage sometimes and things like that. So there's no, I was also very lucky. I think that was the flexibility of entrepreneurship. One of the things I promised myself was that when I started to have kids, I would have plenty of time with them, because that was the one element of my own childhood. I didn't have the benefit of building a relationship like I have now with my parents, because they were very busy doing church work. So I said, look, that's the one thing, the one gift I would give my children is time. So in fact, I left Flutterwave in 2018 because of that. I was expecting a baby, and I wanted to spend as much time as possible with my family. And now, even now that I'm working, I carry my family around with me for work. As expensive as it is, I just find a way to make it work. So I think entrepreneurs might need to consider those type of approaches as well, to the extent that it's possible.
Okay, so we have just 2 minutes, and so in 1 minute, from 1 minute from E and 1 minute from Ndidi, the critical question that we have, that last question is, as an entrepreneur, have you failed before? How did you manage, and how did you come through it? Then, any final words for every attendee on this webinar, who are aspiring entrepreneurs or actually entrepreneurs? So 1 minute to Ndidi and 1 minute to E. Ndidi, would you go first?
Thank you so much. Of course, I've made many, many mistakes along the way, and I'm still learning every day. And I think that's the message I want to give entrepreneurs, is that you will fall, but you will rise again. COVID-19 has been a shock to all of us. And it's really hurt a lot of businesses. But this is a time for you to build back better. What you need is the passion, the vision, the conviction that God, who has brought you this far, will be faithful to complete all that He has started in you. And I think for me, the encouragement I want to leave behind is that we started a business in this period and it's thriving. And it's because we saw an opportunity and a gap. So open your eyes, as we say in Nigeria, shine your eye, and ask God for divine intervention and a divine wisdom to see opportunities others don't see, and to basically roll up your sleeves and pay the price required to prove that you can build a successful and sustainable business. And remember to plan your succession from day one so that you can build a company that will outlive you. God bless you all. It's been a pleasure
Thank you
engaging.
so much. Thank you so much. E, let's hear from you. E, can you unmute?
For me, my own story has been one of failing my way to success. So I have had a lot of failures, and I will continue to have quite a bit of failures. And it's really the only way that it's possible to really change it is if you're not failing, you're not pushing the envelope enough. So failure is a huge part of my story. My final word to entrepreneurs is that at the end of the day, what God desires for us, particularly as Christian, I'm assuming we're all here because we're Christian entrepreneurs. And what God has designed for us is really for us to be salt in the world, and particularly with our businesses. We have to think about our businesses as another avenue for ministry, right? And that means that it needs to be beyond profit. I think that's one thing I'll keep harping on with entrepreneurs, particularly from our parts of the world. It has to be beyond profit. You have to treat it as mission, right? And that means that you're identifying a problem and an opportunity to change people's lives by the way that you do business, through the products that you offer. And by the time you think about business in this way, God will handsomely reward you, because he does that to everybody who diligently serves him. So that's my word to entrepreneurs: think beyond profits.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This session has been so amazing. I mean, it's a mini MBA of some sort, and I want to believe that everybody who has been part of the session has benefited. Thanks to our panelists, to Ndidi and to E, for giving us 2 full hours of your time. We have learned so much. We hope to be able to do this again. And of course, Ndidi has recommended up to 6-7 books during the course of our conversations. People, please look for those books, and let's get to be learners, lifelong learners as we go on. And of course, if you'd like to know more, please follow us on www.insightsforliving.org. Thank you so much again for attending. To everybody who waited through the 2 hours on today's session, God bless you and have a good weekend. Thank you so much.
God bless you all. Bye-bye.
God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.